Zoro is a loser. Yes, I said that, and I'll explain why. When he was a kid, he lost more than 2,000 times to Kuina. Every single fight ended the same way. Zoro on the ground, angry and frustrated. Then he met Mihawk and challenged him to a duel. And guess what? It was barely even a fight. Mihawk humiliated him. He did not even bother using Yoru at first. Even after he joined the Straw Hats, Zoro's fights almost always ended the same way. He wins for sure, but he always looks completely destroyed. Cuts everywhere, clothes ripped, barely standing, always on the edge. But somehow, Zoro is still one of the most favorite characters in the show. Why is that? Isn't he basically a loser? That is actually the point of his character. Aside from Zoro just being cool, people like him because he does not feel like the chosen one. He earns all of his W. He is just a stubborn swordsman with a big dream, and for some reason, he decided he is going to chase that dream until the day he dies trying. Let's break down how the show set the character to be the greatest. Before we know Zoro as the king of hell and consider one of the strongest, he was just a kid in a dojo trying to prove something, challenging the best students at the dojo, and basically, this is how we know Kuina. Every time he fought Kuina, the result was the same. Zoro on the floor, again and again. He lost more than 2,000 times. At some point I wonder, why the hell does this kid keep asking for another fight? Think about it for a second. If you trained every day and still got beaten by the same person over and over, if that's me, I'll quit once I've lost 10 times, or at least stop challenging her. But Zoro kept coming back and asked for another duel. The thing about Zoro early on is that this guy was just stubborn as hell. Every loss pissed him off. He just trained harder and tried again. And somehow Kuina became the one person who understood that obsession the most, because both of them were chasing the exact same thing, becoming the greatest swordsman in the world. Kuina beating Zoro all the time was frustrating for him, but at least it gave him something to chase. As long as she was there, the goal was clear. Beat Kuina, simple as that. Every loss just meant he had to train harder and come back again tomorrow. It was annoying, sure, but it also pushed him. Then one day everything just stopped. Kuina died. She literally just fell down the stairs. At first, I don't buy that. But you know, sometimes life just happens. And that's the part that makes the whole thing feel so messed up. Someone he fought more than 2,000 times, someone he saw as his biggest rival, just gone like that. You can imagine how confusing that must have felt for Zoro. The one person he was chasing suddenly isn't there anymore. When he first heard that, he doesn't know how to process it. That's when Zoro went to Kuina's father and asked for her sword. The reason is simple. Both of them made the same promise, but Kuina could no longer fulfill it. And for her sake, Zoro decided he would realize their dream and carry her soul in the form of her sword. He will keep their promise. From that moment on, becoming the greatest swordsman was the only reason he lived. After that, time skip and Zoro is fully grown. Zoro left the dojo and started traveling around. If he wanted to become the greatest swordsman, people needed to know his name. You can't challenge the best if nobody even knows who you are. So he went out into the world to build that reputation himself. That's how he ended up becoming a bounty hunter. First, hunting pirates was the easiest way to find people worth fighting. And second is the money. Beat pirates, collect the bounty, and move on to the next fight. Over time, people started hearing about this guy using 3 swords, the pirate hunter. And then we were introduced to Zoro for the first time. He's tied to a post by the Marines, starving for days because he protected Rika from this spoiled goofy Marine kid, Helmeppo. Zoro acts tough, but he's not heartless. And that's where Luffy shows up. By the way, I already talked about how Luffy recruited Zoro in my Luffy video. So if you haven't watched that one yet, make sure to check it out after this. Because the way Luffy sees Zoro is actually kind of interesting. Luffy hears Zoro's story from Rika. She brings him onigiri, and even after Helmeppo throws the food on the ground, Zoro insisted on eating it. It's such a small moment, but that tells Luffy everything he needs to know. This random rubber kid walks in, sees a cool guy tied to a post, and immediately decides he wants him on his crew. And when Zoro hears that Luffy's dream is to become the Pirate King, he thinks that this idiot might actually be serious. Luffy is basically just like him, someone who pursues an impossible dream. So Zoro makes another promise. He'll join the crew, but Zoro only cares about becoming the greatest swordsman. And if Luffy ever gets in the way of that dream, Zoro says he'll cut him down himself. At this point, the crew is still small, still figuring things out, and then they meet someone Zoro has been chasing for a long time, Takanome Mihawk, the strongest swordsman in the world, the exact person Zoro needs to beat if he ever wants to keep that promise he made years ago. And what he do immediately challenges him. Mihawk doesn't even take him seriously at first. He pulls out this tiny knife instead of Yoru and still completely overwhelms Zoro. Mihawk literally tells him, a frog in a well that doesn't know how vast the world is. It's not even a real fight. It's basically Mihawk showing him the gap between them, and that gap is humongous. But Zoro being Zoro, he doesn't step back. Even after realizing he will lose, Zoro turns his body and says, scars on the back are a swordsman's shame. So he turns his chest toward Mihawk and takes the final strike head-on. Mihawk finally respects that and uses Yoru to end the fight. But before he passes out, he makes another promises to Luffy. I'm never going to lose again. And Mihawk leaves him with one last thing, basically telling him, get stronger and come find me again. Again, a promise. Zoro take promise seriously. Every fight he takes, it's all part of getting closer to that goal. But something slowly changes along the way. At first, Zoro only cared about becoming the greatest swordsman. But after traveling with the crew for a while, Zoro doesn't just fight for himself anymore. He starts fighting for Luffy too. During the Alabasta arc, Chopper actually asks Zoro why he follows Luffy when Luffy is such a troublesome captain. Zoro's answer is pretty interesting. He says everyone on the crew has their own dreams and goals, but somewhere along the way, they also picked up a new one, which is helping Luffy become the Pirate King. The moment that really shows who Zoro is as a vice captain happens during Water 7. Up until then, we saw him as the cool guy with swords and bad navigation skills, but Water 7 showed his standards. This is when the crew starts falling apart. Luffy and Usopp fighting, Mary dying, Robin missing, emotions are all over the place. It's messy. Nobody really knows what to do because everyone understands why Usopp liked that. However, at the same time, the captain made the right decision. In post-Water 7, everyone is kind of ready to just welcome Usopp, but Zoro shuts that down immediately. He tells them that if Usopp comes back without apologizing, then the crew is basically a joke. He knows everyone cares about each other, but as he said, this is not playing pirate. This is the real deal. A crew without order is just a group of people traveling together. They needs rules, responsibility, and consequences. Zoro saw the bigger picture. He knew if the first disrespect was ignored, more would follow. Leadership is not just personality. It requires lines that cannot be crossed. Zoro told Luffy, if you let him back without an apology, I will be the one who leaves. You do not disrespect the man you call captain. For Zoro, loyalty and respect are everything. Thriller Bark is where that loyalty goes to the extreme. The crew is already done fight with Moria. Everyone is barely standing, but then Kuma shows up. He basically tells them the government wants Luffy's head. If they hand Luffy over, everyone else gets to live. That's the deal. Obviously, the crew say no, and then they were demolished. Again, Zoro doesn't even hesitate. He strikes Kuma, but at this point he knew they can't win. So he make a deal to take his head instead. Sanji even tries to jump in and do the same thing, but Zoro knocks him out, because in his mind, this is his responsibility. As the right-hand man, this is his role. And in Japanese history, a samurai is nothing if he cannot protect his master. In this context, Luffy is his captain. Then Kuma pulls out all the pain Luffy went through during the fight and tells Zoro to take it, and Zoro takes all of it. And then Sanji finds him standing there covered in blood, barely alive. Sanji asks him what happened, and Zoro just say the word. Nothing happened. He protect his captain because he gave his word. Luffy's dream comes first. And if Zoro cannot protect the captain who is aiming to be Pirate King, then his own dream means nothing. After everything they went through, the crew finally reaches Shibodi. And this place is basically where the world starts feeling way bigger than what they've dealt with before. You have all these other pirates showing up too, and then the worst generation. Everyone there is strong, big name, Straw Hats are just one group among many. Standing beside Luffy, Zoro did not act like someone hungry for power. Other characters believed he should have been leading his own crew, but Zoro had already chosen his path. If Luffy said they fight, he fought. If Luffy said to run, he ran. He believed in Luffy's dream the same way he believed in his own. But then things get even worse with the Celestial Dragons. Luffy punches one of them, pacifistas start showing up, Kizaru show up, and the situation gets out of control fast. The crew tries to fight back, but it's obvious they're completely outmatched. And then Kuma shows up again. One by one, the crew starts disappearing. In the end, the whole crew gets separated. And that moment hits hard, because for the first time, it's clear the world they're trying to survive in is way bigger than they thought. At this moment, Zoro ends up on Kurigana Island, the same place where Mihawk lives, the man he swore he would defeat one day. And after the war at Marineford, Luffy sends that message, telling them to meet again in 2 years. And finally, Zoro gets what that means. If the crew is going to survive in the new world, The level they had before just isn't enough. What Zoro did was something unexpected. He kneels and asks Mihawk, "Train me to surpass you." For someone like Zoro, that's a huge deal. This is a guy whose entire identity is built around pride as a swordsman. Asking your rival to train you is basically swallowing that pride completely. Mihawk was initially disappointed in him, but then he understands a swordsman who swallow his pride is always for someone. He knows it's for Luffy, to stand beside the man he chose to follow. Mihawk understands what that decision means, and that's why he accepts. When you look back at Zoro's story, what made him different was the way he lived. There's actually a pattern in how he acts. Like the moment with Rika, later in Wano, you will see it with Yasui, with Otoko, with Otama. Even in Alabasta, when Smoker was drowning, Luffy told Zoro to save him. Zoro questioned it. He asked why, because helping an enemy made no sense, but he helped anyway. And that is why Vivi gave him the name Mr. Bushido, which fits him pretty well. Because the way he carried himself was steady, controlled, and firm. Bushido is basically the old samurai code. Things like honor, loyalty, discipline, and standing by your word even when it costs you something. Which is very Zoro if you think about that. When you look at the Straw Hats as a whole, a lot of them have some kind of crazy background. Special families, famous bloodlines, big destinies tied to the world. Luffy is connected to Dragon, Garp, and tied to the will of D. Sanji comes from the Vinsmoke family. Robin has the whole Ohara history behind her. Even Usopp has Yasop. A lot of these characters were kind of born into something bigger. But what about Zoro? Most of what he is came from training, losing, and getting back up again. Nobody handed him some crazy destiny. He was just some stubborn kid in a dojo who decided he wanted to be the greatest swordsman in the world, and then spent his entire life chasing that goal. He had to grind for it himself. Even though there is a small detail later connecting him to the Shimotsuki line and Ryuma from Wano, but it's not really relevant. It's not something that suddenly changes who he is. Zoro still feels like someone who built himself the hard way. When you look at Zoro now, it's easy to forget where this whole thing started. At the end of the day, he's still that same stubborn kid from the dojo, the one who kept getting knocked down by Kuina and still came back the next day asking for another fight. That promise he made back then is still the thing pushing him forward. Becoming the greatest swordsman in the world is something he carries with him every step of the way, and at the same time, he's still standing beside Luffy. Helping his captain achieve his dream is the way for him to achieve his own dream as well. Those two promises are the key to Zoro as a character. And I think that's why Zoro feels different from a lot of characters. He knows he started as a loser, someone who lost 2,000 times, someone who had nothing except a promise and a stubborn will. But that is why he trains while everyone else sleeps. That is why he sharpens his blade when everyone else relaxes. What makes Zoro stand out is something simpler. He just keeps grinding. He feels like someone we could be if we stopped making excuses. He is proof that you don't need to be chosen, blessed, or special. You just need a goal worth bleeding for. And that is exactly why he is the most favorite character in One Piece. If you think I missed something about Zoro or got something wrong, let me know in the comments. And also, tell me which character you think I should break down next. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching. Seriously.